What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was recruited into an all-female ANBU squad? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. The figure landed exactly 20 yards from the front gate in keeping with the standard protocol. If he had been even so much as an inch closer, they would have been using his roasted remains as visual aid to teach new cadets what became of hotshots who tried to push the envelope a little too far. Then again, he wasn't much for caution. As he walked in he knew, even though his body didn't register any change, that his chakra had been locked. A result of the elaborate fuinjutsu seals that lined the entire compound. Understandable. It was after the ANBU HQ after all. Konoha's temple for all things related to its intelligence. It was the foundation on which Konoha stood strong, mighty and invincible. Everything from the priorities of missions to details of black ops and strategic assets were processed here. A brainchild of the Nidaime Hokage, it was now entering its 77th year. Anyone wanting to cripple Konoha would have to look no further for a target. Removing or even damaging the foundation would lead to its collapse. Sounded really simple, right? It wasn't. The security around this place would make the one around the Hokage Tower look like Konoha markets on Trader's Day, though in entirely different ways. While the Hokage Tower was a fortress, nigh impregnable, ANBU HQ was more akin to a black hole. You will get in, but you sure as hell won't be getting out. Not before the guys in the T&I department were done with you anyway. After which your dead remains will be going to the morgue for incineration, of course. The locking of chakra was just the preliminary measure. It was something he discovered on his own. He had discovered at least a dozen more, he was sure there were hundreds. Sometimes in his free time he tried to frame scenarios where he was the enemy trying to infiltrate the place. None of them ended particularly well for him. He walked to the first checkpoint, where he rolled up his sleeves to reveal his ANBU tattoo on his upper left forearm. The leaf symbol on his arm was a simple enough design and could be replicated by anyone with half a brain, except it really wasn't just a tattoo. It was his identity card. Each one was unique in its own way, and trying to replicate one would not only be futile but incredibly stupid. The man manning the post scanned it once before waving him in. He passed through half a dozen more of these checkpoints. The entire process took 15 minutes. The place was similar to the Konoha mission desk in some ways. The same basic plan, but the difference was like night and day. An apt analogy. While the Konoha mission desk catered mainly to civilian clients, this was where the real action was. Matters related to Konoha's security only. Mission difficulty started from A ranks and only got higher. Almost everything was classified. Rumor had it that the office of the Hokage itself wasn't in on half of what went on in here. The cool ambience coupled with the gray walls gave the place an oppressive aura contrary to the more friendly mission desk. This place was Konoha's dark side given shape. He handed his mission scroll to the man manning the desk, who barely registered its contents: heads of 3 B-ranked missing nins. 2 from Kusa, and 1 from Kumo. It had taken him the better part of a month to track and kill them. The man made some entries into a register. This info would be circulated and used to update the bingo books. It was a cumbersome process, but it needed to be done. After collecting his paycheck he proceeded to the lockers. The locker room was attached to the showers, something he really needed. Most lockers had the personalized touch of their owners. Some made shrines of their loved ones. Others used theirs for keeping secrets from their loved ones. In here you could learn a lot about the men and women behind the masks if you just kept your eyes open. Some even kept photos of celebrities they admired. His, however, was more bare bones than the others. It wasn't personalized in any way, housing only the bare essentials. A change of civilian clothes and his spare uniform were all it contained at the moment. He removed his mask and was about to reach for the clothes when he felt a familiar presence behind. "You're losing your touch, Kakashi," he observed dryly as he slammed his lockers shut and turned around to see the man leaning on the lockers a few yards away from him. The silver-haired Cyclops casually turned a page of his book as he spoke. "Or maybe you just got better," he said, "though I have to ask, were you just fishing for compliments?" Sasuke rolled his eyes. He couldn't believe he walked into that one. He could never get the best of Kakashi in a verbal duel. The man was craftier than a fox and more slippery than a serpent. "Why are you here?" he settled for asking. While Kakashi hadn't officially been a part of ANBU for years, he was still engaged with them as a consultant, giving him enough reasons to be here. A fact which never failed to irk him. "You wound my heart, Sasuke-kun," Kakashi said, still leafing through his book, "and here I was thinking you would have missed your old sensei." Sasuke had to admit, grudgingly even to himself, the man was a master at pissing people off. A talent which he suspected served the man rather well in the battlefield. He bet his opponents were too pissed and annoyed at him to be thinking clearly while facing him. The reason why Kakashi was still here and his opponents were not. His own irritation was so great that he barely registered that the man had used his real name, a fact which went strictly against protocol. "One of these days I am going to slit your throat in your sleep," he threatened. "I'd be worried if you knew where I slept," Kakashi remarked. "As for why I am here, I am here to offer you a job." Sasuke raised an eyebrow skeptically. "I already have a job. I'm offering you a better one." Kakashi shut his book and tossed him a scroll, which he caught. Despite himself, Sasuke opened the scroll, burning with curiosity. A quick look through it and he shut the scroll to toss it right back at his former sensei. "Not interested," he said curtly. "Why not? I work alone. Teams aren't my thing." Part of the reason he took this job was the liberty it allowed him, and it would be a cold day in hell before he gave that up. Anything else?" Kakashi asked him, concern lacing his voice, which could easily be mistaken as genuine, but Sasuke knew better. However, he had been given an opening and he would exploit the shit out of it. "Gee, I don't know. It couldn't be because of the fact that you're demoting me to Chunin, or the fact that you'd be leading it. Couldn't possibly be either of those, could it?" He tried to lace as much sarcasm as he possibly could. Kakashi chuckled as if enjoying the antics of a misbehaving puppy. "It's cute how you seem to be under the delusion that you have a choice," Kakashi said. "You seem to have overlooked the fact that you're not my superior, Kakashi." Sasuke smirked. "I answer to the ANBU director. I doubt he would be keen to let me go." Kakashi said nothing for a while and seemed to sigh with defeat, and Sasuke's smirk got wider, having finally got one over Kakashi. He turned around to walk away and only his reflexes stopped the projectile from hitting his face. He was puzzled. Kakashi wasn't petty enough to throw stuff out of tantrums. He studied the projectile closely and realized it was another scroll. His stomach dropped. It had the official seal of the ANBU director, which could only mean one thing. "Is it your relieving letter?" Kakashi chirped cheerfully. "Yes, it is. The ANBU thanks you for your services." Sasuke couldn't believe this was happening. He had nightmares which started like this. Maybe this was one too. Any moment now he would wake up and forget about all this. "You're not dreaming, Sasuke-kun," Kakashi said, his words barely being registered through the haze of Sasuke's shock. "Training Ground 7, Friday, 9 a.m. sharp. See you then." Kakashi walked away from Sasuke, giving the boy time to process his fate. "One down," he said to himself, 3 to go. Location: Konoha General Hospital. "So, I told her if it bothered her so much she should just avoid her, you know," the elderly woman said. "I mean, if she spent a fraction of the time bothering me telling her how she exactly felt about her, she wouldn't be in this mess now, would she? You know what I mean?" "As a matter of fact I do, Rizu-san," Sakura said, smiling indulgently at the woman, while checking her blood pressure. Her current patient was a lady well into her 60s. She wasn't exactly a patient. She was just here for her weekly health checkup. For some reason she always requested Sakura. Konoha had a program where shinobi medics were required to volunteer in a civilian hospital for a preset number of hours. The idea was to establish a camaraderie not only between the shinobi medics and their civilian counterparts but also the general populace. Most of the medics she knew treated their hours with the enthusiasm of 5-year-olds faced with the possibility of eating their greens without the added advantage of knowing that it was good for them. For Sakura, however, the mundane everyday problems of the civilian populace made for a welcome change after the life and death situations she dealt with in the field. "You know Sukune will be here next month, so maybe you could show him around, you know," the woman continued the lopsided conversation. "He really doesn't know anyone here." Sakura sighed patiently. Sukune was Rizu's grandson. She was the woman's favorite topic of conversation along with her neighbors and her youngest daughter-in-law. He was a businessman who owned several casinos in the town of Tanzaku-gai, as Rizu often bragged. Ever since striking a friendship with Sakura, she had gotten taken with the idea of setting her up with him and always seemed to be working towards that goal, not so subtly. I might not be in Konoha then, Sakura said gently, trying to sway the woman from her current line of thinking. You know how the system goes. Yes, I know. The woman said dismissively, waving her hand, while Sakura helped the woman to her feet and into her coat. She had taken off at the start of her checkup. I don't know how a nice, pretty girl like you can throw in your lot with those barbarians. Sakura laughed the woman's concerns away, not taking offense to the woman's words or correcting her perception about said demons, and how she happened to be one of them. Everything looks good, Rizu-san. Sakura told her patient. I will have Saburo send over your full report by tomorrow. The woman went her way, extolling the virtues of garlic which she credited to her good health, while Sakura went to the office of the senior medical officer to take her next case. Well, that's it for the day, Sakura-san, he told her. It's been a rather slow day. By the way, there is someone here waiting for you, says you are late for an appointment. Sakura grimaced. She had hoped that she would receive a pass today. Apparently, no such luck for her. She wasn't looking forward to this. She could always skip, but that would be just avoiding the problem for now in return for escalating it later. Her choice was made. I guess I will be leaving then, she told him, and getting a nod of sympathy in return at her predicament, even though he wasn't quite sure what it was. Take your time, he called after her. Take the rest of the day off, if you have to. Thanks. Sakura discarded her hospital gown and changed into her uniform before exiting the hospital premises to rendezvous with her escort, and was surprised to see her best friend. Well, look who's finally here, Ino said, her tone laced with amusement, seeing her friend in disarray. Hope you have a handy excuse, 'cause he wasn't happy. The old Sakura would have gone on the offensive or made up some excuse. These days, however, avoiding conflict was becoming something of a habit. He sent you to drag me to him? Sakura said a little skeptically. Oh no dear, I volunteered. Ino said unashamedly. Now let's get you there, shall we? You seem to garner a lot of pleasure from my misery. Sakura complained as she walked next to her friend, trying to prepare herself for what was to come next. You brought it on yourself. Ino countered. You missed your last 2 appointments, forehead. Sakura barely registered her hated nickname, as her mind wandered to the reasons she was summoned. If she had, she would have caught the concern in her friend's voice. But right now she was just walking resolutely forward, wanting it to be over. Look, I know it has been hard, but he's just trying to help, Ino told her, so cut him some slack, will you? I'll try, Sakura said, trying not to commit. You know you don't need to escort me all the way there. Hey, I'm just following orders? But I will make it up to you, Ino said unashamedly before changing tracks. How about a girls' night out? I'll see if Hinata and Tenten are free and we can all go out. Sakura bit her lip, not quite sure if she wanted to, and to make matters worse, she really didn't know how to refuse her friend either. Come on, Thursdays are ladies' night at the Blue Bar. Ino kept trying to convince her. Fine, she finally conceded, earning a whoop of celebration from Ino. Sakura couldn't help smiling. Ino's enthusiasm was infectious. Her good mood, however, plummeted a few notches when she realized that they were finally where they needed to be. The building they were at wasn't large or imposing by any means. It was a single-floor, white structure with a cobbled pathway leading to the front door, surrounded by a plush green lawn, giving it a rather pleasant aura. It was the most intimidating place in Konoha as far as Sakura was concerned. It didn't help that it stood right next to the building that housed the Konoha Torture and Interrogation Department. Well, this is it, Ino squeezed her arm once, offering comfort. Good luck. Taking a deep breath to steel herself, Sakura walked towards the building like a convict walking to their execution. The receptionist guided her to his office, whose mahogany doors were shut at the moment. Without pausing, she rattled the gold-plated knocker announcing her arrival. Enter, came the command from inside. On entering, the first thing that greeted her was a pleasant smell, one she couldn't quite place. It was distinctively floral, but unlike any she had ever encountered. The rest of the room looked familiar. Painted light yellow, with a medium-sized desk and a few chairs. Sheaves of files and paper occupied the lone table in a state of controlled mess. In addition, there was a couch placed near the right side wall of the room. The man was the last thing that entered Sakura's line of vision. He seemed to be working on a plant. Wearing gloves, the kind gardeners wore, and diligently snapping twigs off the plant with a pair of shears. Take a seat, Sakura-chan, the man said without bothering to turn around. I'll be with you in a second. Sakura patiently waited for the man to finish his work. She didn't have to wait long, fortunately. Snapping his gloves off with a pleased grin, and removing his goggles, he smiled at her and waved his arm towards the plant. So what do you think? He asked her with the air of an artist revealing his masterpiece to the world. Sakura blinked in confusion for a couple of times before realizing he was asking for her opinion about the plant. Recovering, she studied it for a few seconds before feeling confident enough to give an opinion. It definitely looks healthy enough, Sakura ventured, but I must admit I've never seen flowers like that. What is it? I haven't named it yet, he said, pride evident in his voice. It has a very pleasant fragrance, doesn't it? Sakura was impressed despite herself. Breeding a new species was a time-consuming work requiring a lot of patience and dedication. It's beautiful, she murmured. Yes, it is, the man agreed, but unfortunately we must now turn our attention to less pleasant subjects. Sakura grimaced, waiting to be given a dressing down. Inoichi Yamanaka, her counselor, also happened to be the father of her best friend. He had seen her grow up and he had been a part of a lot of her pleasant memories. That didn't make any of this easier though. He had taken a personal interest in her case. Something which would have been frowned upon because of his personal history with her, but he had made it happen. She still wasn't sure if she should be grateful for his consideration or insulted at his coddling. Why did you miss your last 2 sessions? He asked her, taking his seat on the opposite side of the table facing her. I've been swamped at the hospital, came her automatic reply. Inoichi smiled at her and not with disapproval or condescension. So you've kept yourself busy? He said, that's a good thing. You've been productive despite your ordeals when it would have been so much easier to retreat within yourself. Yeah, well, if I'm busy I'm not dwelling. Sakura shrugged. She didn't want approval for this. She didn't deserve it. Inoichi paused, evidently waiting for her to elaborate, but she kept her silent. You moved out of your house a couple of years ago, he said after a while. What made you take that decision? That wasn't a hard question to answer. I'd been a chunin for several months by then, my hours were inconvenient to say the least, it just felt like the right time. Has that affected your relationship with your parents? Mother took it hard at the beginning, but she was supportive. And your father? No, it didn't change anything. What about your relationships outside your family? I have drifted away from most of my academy friends except Ino, though we are still cordial with each other when we meet up. The series of questions and answers continued for a while. Sakura had begun to relax when Inoichi finally closed on a topic which was a potential minefield. You were in a relationship, I believe. Sakura paused as she pondered over what she would say next. She had indeed been in a serious relationship. She had dated a civilian for almost a year after becoming a chunin. He had been the son of one of her mother's friends. She had met him at a party, and one thing had led to another. He was handsome, charming and sweet, and unlike most civilian guys wasn't intimidated by her job and status as a kunoichi. So when he had asked her to be his girlfriend, she had accepted. The first few months had been great. He was supportive and seemed to take pride in the fact that he was dating a kunoichi. But inevitably her job started to take a toll on their relationship. Her newly acquired rank and status as a medic kept her busy in the field for almost 3/4 of a month. It was getting harder and harder for them to take time out for each other. But they had been determined to make it work and tried hard to keep at it. Her last field mission had served as the final nail in the coffin, however. It wasn't working out. She tried to be nonchalant about it, but talking about it was still like getting stabbed through her heart. We couldn't make time for each other. You broke up after you returned from your last mission, and you haven't been in the field for almost 3 months now, Inoichi said. So, would you want to talk about the real reason? Sakura remained silent this time. Resolutely so. You need to talk about what happened to you sometimes, Sakura, Inoichi sighed, not put off by the girl's defiance. Keeping these things bottled up is unhealthy. I just don't feel ready. Sakura muttered, breaking eye contact with the man. Inoichi remained silent for a while, before tearing a paper from his pad and scribbling something on it and handing it to her. Sakura realized it was an address. She looked up at him questioningly. This is the last session you will have with me, Sakura, Inoichi said. I'm clearing you for active duty. Sakura was shocked. This was the last thing she expected. Technically a shinobi could be cleared 3 months after having survived a traumatic mission, but she hadn't expected it. Getting back on the field wasn't something she had been dreading, but it wasn't something she felt she was ready for either. Just like that? She asked, thoroughly puzzled. You have your issues, Sakura, he elaborated, but if our sessions have told me something, it's that I can't be the one to help you. Only you can do that. Are you angry with me? Just the opposite. I know exactly what you are going through, he said, gesturing towards the piece of paper he had just handed her. When you have the time, go to that address any Friday, 5 p.m. I don't have to go if I don't want to? I wish you would, Inoichi admitted, but no, it's completely voluntary. Sakura stared at the paper for a while before pocketing it. Sakura left Inoichi feeling rather weird. She hadn't been expecting that. Feeling a little dazed, she made her way to her apartment. She was barely halfway there when a messenger Chunin intercepted her, handing her a scroll. The scroll carried summons from the Hokage herself. This day just got a lot more eventful than she thought it would be when she woke up this morning. Thanking the messenger, she changed her course to the Hokage Tower. The receptionist at the front desk took one look at her and waved her in, leaving her mystified as there were several others who were seated in the waiting room to meet the Hokage. Two of the men she recognized as prominent merchants who had dealings with her family, and one looked like an official from the daimyo's court. Suddenly a cold ball of dread took shape in her abdomen. Why had she been summoned? She was a mere Chunin. Someone way down the totem pole to be even considered being granted an audience. Let alone being a priority over actual important people. She had seen the Hokage only twice. Both times it was during guest lectures that she gave to aspiring medic nins in the program. One was a theoretical lecture on the effect of various toxins on the cell membranes of various tissues. The other was a practical class where she demonstrated an extremely risky procedure involving the use of healing chakra through one's own blood. Something she had tried in her last ill-fated mission. The ANBU stationed at the door opened it to allow her in. She muttered a thanks as she walked in, wondering what exactly she was walking into. The first thing that came to mind when she entered the Hokage's office was that it had one hell of a view. The right window opened out to give an excellent view of the Hokage mountain, while the left gave a panoramic view of the entire village. The room itself was simple enough, though rather tastefully furnished. Then her eyes fell on the lone occupant of the room. Tsunade Senju was a beautiful woman in her 50s who didn't look a day over 25. But that was just the physical aspect. She was also one of the most feared ninjas of the era, the greatest medic nin bar none, with a pedigree matched only by the now nearly extinct Uchiha. In her relatively short reign as the Hokage, she had proved herself to be a shrewd and effective administrator. Sakura stood there awkwardly staring at the great woman, who seemed to be engrossed in the paperwork in front of her, not even registering the additional presence in the room. Feeling she should do something, Sakura bowed from her waist. Chunin Haruno Sakura reporting, Hokage-sama. The woman's eyes peered over the folder she had been reading to meet Sakura's. Sakura resisted the urge to gulp, and fought her shaking knees. It might have only been 3 seconds before she spoke, but to Sakura it felt closer to 3 hours. Take a seat, Haruno-san. Sakura obeyed, trying to keep her movements smooth and graceful, something she failed at as she almost knocked over a pile of files off the table. Her reflexes saved her from a greater embarrassment. Mumbling a quick apology to her leader, who ignored it altogether, she finally settled herself. I was just going through your file, she said, indicating the folder she had been reading. It makes for rather interesting reading material, I must say. There is a lot to like here. Sakura remained silent as the Hokage continued to talk. Excellent grades in the academy, graduated with honors as the top kunoichi at age 12. Disciplined, focused and driven, with a keen intellect and imagination. Works well with others and shows potential as a leader, Tsunade continued, very impressive indeed. Praise from the Hokage should have been a matter of joy and pride for her, but she had a feeling this meeting wasn't a pat in the back for doing a good job. And it gets better. Participated in your first Chunin exams 6 months after graduating on the recommendation of your Junin sensei and made it to the final round, eventually earning a field promotion a few months later, after which you joined the medical program, where again you distinguished yourself as the brightest candidate, completing the 4-year course in 2.5. I can go on and on. All your superiors have written you glowing commendations and have nothing but praise for you. Sakura could sense a but coming. So, well, close enough. Why are you wasting your time? Sakura had walked in expecting to be reprimanded. She wasn't sure for what, but she was expecting it. But for her to be on the receiving end of one because of her achievements wasn't something she knew how to respond to. I'm afraid I don't understand Hokage-sama, she stuttered. I read your file, up to and including your last field mission. She said, then she held up another file. She recognized it as one of those written by Inoichi containing the psychological evaluation of the shinobi returning from field duty. There is only one thing I would like to say to you. Get over your pity party, kid. Sakura's jaw almost dropped to the floor, but Tsunade was on a roll now. You're not the first to lose their team on the field and you won't be the last. Hell, this might not be the last time you lose a team. This is the world we live in, and I'm not going to coddle you and hold your hand to say everything will be alright. You're a kunoichi for Kami's sake, and I won't have you playing nursemaid to a bunch of civilian grandmothers. She paused to take a breath, cause if that's what you are going to do, I swear I will kick you off the force myself. So I'll ask you, is that what you want? A bubble of rage expanded within Sakura. For the first time in a long time, she could feel her blood pounding again with adrenaline. She wanted to rant and rave at the woman, though the saner and more rational part of her head told her that the actions she was contemplating could be treated as insubordination at best and treason at worst. Clenching her fist in her palms, she managed to calm down and answered in a relatively steady voice. No, Hokage-sama. Good, Tsunade clapped her hands once. In that case, you are being reassigned. You'll meet your new Junin leader 3 days from now at the training ground 7. I don't care what you need to do to get your shit back together. Get drunk, late or whatever it is that you kids do these days to clean your systems. I want you mission ready. Any questions? The rather blue language of the Hokage aside, she did have questions. She had a lot of questions as a matter of fact, but she also had the feeling they wouldn't be appreciated at the moment. No, Hokage-sama, she settled for saying with as much defiance she could pack in her voice. Just for a fraction of a second she could see a hint of approval in the Hokage's gaze, but it was gone as soon as it came. In that case you're dismissed. So, there, I did your job for you, Tsunade said to the seemingly empty room once the Chunin had left. From the shadows emerged a tall, masked, gray-haired man with his headband covering his right eye, casually leafing through a book in his hands. She really wished he had the courtesy to not read it in her presence at the very least. But it was one quirk she had tried to overlook considering what she was putting him through, not to mention Kakashi was the best shinobi in the service and had earned that much. The girl has fire and I can see why you'd want her, the Junin admitted, pocketing the book. Though I must admit that was kinda harsh even for you. She'll get over it. Tsunade waved off his concerns nonchalantly. Don't you have somewhere to be right now? I guess I do. The man said, if you'll excuse me. And Kakashi. She called out to the back of the exiting Junin as she went back to her paperwork. Don't be late. Location: Konoha Mission Center. Naruto patiently waited his turn in the queue to submit his mission report and more importantly collect his paycheck. Even though the correct term should have been wages if he was being honest. The mission was nothing more than household chore undertaken for the civilian populace and in some cases the shinobi ones too. A shinobi of his age should have found the work degrading and genin his age were generally looked down upon by their more successful compatriots. But he didn't mind. Work was work and money was money. After all, pride never paid bills nor did it put food on the table. He had no family and few acquaintances, so in his opinion he did just fine. He didn't mind the work either. It was honest work and gave him a chance to be productive. His work had gained him some popularity with the clients too. Popularity, though, probably was not the right word. But he was definitely sought after. On a good day he could complete 3 missions. So he ignored the borderline condescending looks he received from the rest of the shinobi in line. Most of them were directed his way by the Junin who were escorting their wards after a day of missions. The new genin usually kept to themselves, still soaking in the novelty of finally being given the right to be called shinobi. Their older ones stood there sulking about the D-ranked missions. But most of them were just too happy to be part of something bigger. Still untouched by the cruelty of their world. When his turn finally came, he was pleasantly surprised to see a familiar and friendly face at the mission desk. Hey Naruto, the scarred but smiling face of Iruka greeted him. Long time no see. I'll say. Naruto returned the grin. You got fired from the academy or something, sensei? I knew they would wear you down eventually. As if. Iruka snorted, after having dealt with you for so long, I have gained the resilience and patience of a mountain. You know what they say. What doesn't kill you? Iruka and Naruto went back some way. During his academy days, Iruka had been his teacher and some might even say a mentor. One of the few people who took an active interest in his well-being. Kami knew he wasn't an easy brat to care for. He had been a devil during his younger days. His pranks kept most of the Chunin forces on their toes, Iruka included. It was funny how they became friends. It started out as intense dislike. Iruka had hated his disruptive behavior during the classes, and Naruto resented the man for being the only one to catch him and for sabotaging his pranks. It soon became a contest. A test of wills, neither willing to break before the other. Before long the intense dislike turned to grudging respect which turned to actual respect, and the rest as they say is history. Yeah, Naruto conceded, but seriously. Why are you here? Survival training, came the reply. Ah, Ran? Nope, Suzume. That explains it. Ever since its inception the academy held mock survival training sessions in and around the training grounds surrounding the village. It was led by the Chunin instructors. It could last anywhere between a few days to a couple of weeks. Naruto remembered these times somewhat more fondly than the others. It also explained Iruka's presence here. With no classes to teach he had been assigned to the mission desk. Though Naruto knew it was more likely that he volunteered. Hey, people are waiting here, shouted one of the disgruntled Chunin in the queue. Hold your horses will you? Iruka shouted back, before shooting Naruto an apologetic look. Taking this as his cue, Naruto handed over his mission reports. We should catch up sometime. Iruka continued handing Naruto his paycheck. Yeah we should, Naruto agreed. Can't wait to tell you all about the excitement my last mission entailed when I stubbed my toe while painting a fence. Speaking of which you wouldn't happen to have any C ranks for me would you? You know you need a full genin team? And a Junin instructor, yeah I know. I had to try. Iruka must have picked up on his dejection despite his attempts to hide it and his next words confirmed it. Tell you what, why don't you meet me for lunch tomorrow? That will give you the chance to brag about the Chunin exams you participated in. I don't know, Naruto muttered noncommittally. I'll be buying. Ichiraku's at 1? Fine. Now get out of here brat, before you start a riot at the queue. Naruto laughed good-naturedly as he walked out of the room, feeling better than he did when he walked in. Senpai. A female voice came from somewhere behind him. Naruto paid it little mind. He wanted to get home, fix some dinner and go to sleep. Maybe he should make a trip to Ichiraku's. He hadn't seen Tucci and Ayame in a while. Senpai. But then again he would be having lunch there tomorrow. So seeing his friends could wait. But he was really craving ramen right now. Senpai. The voice called out again. This time a lot closer than before. Now Naruto was beginning to get annoyed at this nameless senpai, ignoring this girl. But before he could turn around an arm wrapped itself around his own and turned him around to come face to face with a familiar face. Miyuki? He exclaimed on seeing the girl who for the last 30 seconds had been trying to get his attention. Hey, the girl's face was flushed. I thought you were ignoring me. Yeah sorry about that. Naruto apologized running his hand through his hair. I just wasn't expecting anyone I knew that's all. As far as surprises went, this was a somewhat pleasant one. A few months ago in the Chunin exams held in Iwa, Naruto had been asked to be a part of her team to replace a teammate who had somehow managed to break his ass during a D-ranked mission. Naruto still wasn't sure if it was funny that someone got hurt during a D-ranked or tragic because it happened more often than one would imagine. But he had bonded with the girl during the exams and she had picked up a mild case of hero worship for him. We just came back from a C rank, she said once the initial pleasantries had been exchanged. Sensei and the guys are at the mission desk submitting the report. That's great, Naruto fought down a pang of jealousy at her words. So are you guys participating in the next exams? Miyuki shook her head. Sensei thinks we should gain some more experience and skills before we attempt again, seeing how the last one went. If you hadn't been there we would have been dead for sure. Naruto nodded. It was true. He did save their lives. But they believed that he saved them from a team of Iwa ANBU. That wasn't exactly true. They were being hunted, but it wasn't by a team of ANBU. There was only one in the team that attacked them. The rest were more than likely just your run-of-the-mill Chunin. Which was a good thing, otherwise things might have gotten a little hairy. They had underestimated him, which factored in him dispatching them fairly easily. But he really didn't mind her thinking that. After all, what is an exaggerated tale or two without a couple of embellishments? There you are, a male voice interrupted their conversation. We wondered where you'd gone. Hey Naruto. Naruto recognized the new arrival as Katashi, the other member of his temporary team. He raised a hand acknowledging him. Katashi walked up to them holding what looked like a paycheck. I did ask to be excused, Miyuki scowled, obviously annoyed at being interrupted. I just came to hand you your check. Katashi defended himself, a little nonplussed at hostility emanating from the girl. Also, sensei is treating us to dinner, would you like to join us? The question was obviously meant for Naruto and the boy was obviously being polite. Naruto was about to refuse. Do join us senpai, Miyuki chimed in, I'm sure sensei would like to speak with you too. Well, that changed things. On the one hand, Naruto was sure while their sensei probably would like to talk to him. The Junin had after all enlisted him to allow his team to participate in the exams. They probably won't appreciate doing that in front of their genin. Definitely not while he would be mooching off of them in a team gathering. Still, it was a free meal, and Naruto felt he deserved a meal at the very least for his troubles. He was about to open his mouth to accept, when there was another interruption, this time by a Junin. And not just any Junin. Most people in Konoha would say he was the Junin. Miyuki-san. I would beg you to consider postponing your dinner plans with Naruto-kun. The Junin addressed the genin. I'm afraid I've to borrow him with regards to a matter of some urgency. You don't mind, do you? The sudden unexpected arrival of the Junin had left the younger genin tongue-tied. Naruto didn't blame them. Even by the standards of Junin, the man's appearance was unsettling. And despite the polite tenor of his voice and words, it was obvious he wasn't asking for permission. Excellent, he said as if the matter was settled, shall we? He addressed Naruto. Naruto sighed helplessly. Sorry guys, guess I'll have to take a rain check on that dinner. Maybe next time. Naruto followed the man outside the mission center and soon fell into a step beside him. Soon the two of them were traversing through the Konoha market. It was a Wednesday. The traders sold their wares at reduced prices compared to the rest of the week. So it was a busier than usual. You know you just cost me a free meal, right? Naruto said, more than a little annoyed at the Junin. Technically, free meals don't cost anything, came the witty reply. Yeah, I'm out of here, Naruto said, turning to walk away. Ma, that was just a joke, Naruto-kun, the man said, placating the blonde genin. But I've to ask, aren't you curious as to why I sought you out? Naruto was curious, all right, extremely so as a matter of fact. But he also knew conversations like this were like a game of poker, and they held stakes. His curiosity versus whatever purpose the man needed him for. His ignorance of the said purpose was both a strength and a weakness. On the one hand, whatever Kakashi had to say could definitely have use to him. On the other hand, it could also lead to a situation he wouldn't be able to walk out of if he didn't do it now. Does it have something to do with my next meal? Naruto quipped. Thought so. Naruto continued on his way. I wish you a good night. Naruto was feeling rather pleased with himself, before the Junin brought him crashing down. I could always order you to follow me, the man said in his trademark lazy drawl. Naruto froze in his tracks. He hadn't thought of that. The Junin could indeed do that. He probably knew this might happen. Judging from his smug smile, not that he could see it behind his mask. The crinkling of his lone visible eye was indication enough though, he probably wanted it to happen. You wouldn't, Naruto tried to salvage some pride, but it was obvious he was only making things worse. The man however continued to regard him with his benign gaze, not bothering to even reply. Naruto sighed in defeat, before once again falling in a step besides the man. You don't challenge a royal flush to a show of hands with a lousy pair after all. Gotta know when to fold them after all. So where are we going? Well, it is time for dinner, I was hoping you could join me. Naruto couldn't recall wanting to punch a man more in his life. To say he was impressed would be an understatement. The man might be an A- grade jerk, but he certainly wasn't a cheapskate. The restaurant he had been led to was one of those expensive posh types. Neon blue lights lit up the entrance. Judging by the way the uniformed escort greeted Kakashi, it was obvious that he was a regular here. Considering how he was able to simply jump the queue outside, he must be one of the patrons. A dark-haired pretty woman probably in her 20s dressed in a blue flower-patterned kimono led them to a table near the back end of the restaurant. Once they were seated, Kakashi placed his order, before gazing at Naruto to do the same. Naruto was hoping to get some ramen, but he needed to get some payback on the man who had dragged him here. So he ordered 3 of the most expensive dishes on the menu. If it bothered the Junin, he didn't show it. The server left, but not before placing a bottle of warm sake on the table. The Junin poured some out in a saucer and offered it to Naruto before pouring some out for himself. May the will of fire burn brightly in you. The man raised his saucer, toasting Naruto. And may it have ignited 100 more before going out. Naruto finished the ritual, before throwing the drink down his throat. He winced at the burn of the alcohol as it went down. It was strong stuff. He wasn't a great drinker and wasn't particularly fond of the drink either. But he endured. Somewhere in the back of his mind he wondered how on earth did the Junin drink it without removing his mask. He must have missed it. His saucer was empty, and he was now pouring a second round. "You aren't going to kill me, are you?" Naruto queried. "No. Why would I want to kill you? I don't know. What would an elite Junin want with a washed-out genin?" Touché. So, back to my original question. What do you want, Hitaki-san? Naruto was through playing games. He simply folded his hands in front of his face and studied the man. So I'm assuming you do know me. Yes, Naruto knew the man. Even among the Junin, the man was an elite. The cream of the crop, so to speak. A hero in the last war. His exploits during and after the war had made him a legend. Though not yet 30, the man had survived through everything a shinobi possibly could and more. There was a legend that the man once cut through a bolt of lightning with his jutsu. Rumor had it that he was being considered for the post of Hokage after the demise of the Sandame, before it finally went to Tsunade Senju. Only by reputation. Kakashi inclined his head in acknowledgement of Naruto's unsaid praise. "What do you know of Team 7, Naruto-kun?" he asked. There was a pause in the conversation as their server appeared with their food. Once she left, with a hasty, "Itadakimasu," Naruto dug in with gusto. He was hungry, and Kakashi was paying. It was no ramen, but it sure as hell was close. So for the next few minutes the conversation was halted as he inhaled his food. If Kakashi was offended by his table manners, he didn't show it. No more than anyone else. Naruto said modestly between bites. Actually, he knew more than most people, being something of a fanboy when it came to the Cage of the Leaf. It was the one aspect of his theoretical education he excelled at, going above and beyond the standard textbooks provided at the academy. "I know it used to be the single greatest shinobi unit in Konoha. They were known to enforce the will of the Hokage under his, or direct authority, and also produced future candidates. Loved by their people and feared everywhere else." "Right you are," Kakashi said, sounding pleased. "Since the time of Naidame-sama, Team 7 has served as the arm of the Hokage. As you no doubt know, the Sandame, Yondaime and even the Godem have been products of this team." Despite not quite sure where Kakashi was going with this, Naruto found himself enjoying the conversation. The place had a nice ambience, the food was heavenly, and he was listening to stories of legends by arguably the greatest living shinobi in Konoha. There were worse ways to spend an evening. Over time, however, this institution collapsed. The Junin continued. The last Team 7 was disbanded over 15 years ago. Why was that? Naruto couldn't help asking. "I'm sure it wasn't over anything important," Kakashi said nonchalantly. "I don't know, sounds pretty important to me." The point is, Kakashi kept talking, ignoring Naruto's query. "The Hokage believes it is time Team 7 was reinstated. This time under me." That was all very interesting, Naruto had to admit. He just wasn't sure why he was being told this. "Is that why you threw this party?" Naruto spread his arms, indicating the impressive spread of food remaining on the table. "I'm sure congratulating you would be the right sentiment, but I must confess I feel rather sorry for you, if I'm the only one you had in your guest list." "I'm afraid you misunderstand me, Uzumaki-san," Kakashi said. "This dinner isn't celebratory, it's business." Now Naruto never considered himself among the brightest Konoha had to offer. His current rank and station were the perfect indicators of that. But street smarts were something he prided himself on. The smarts he had earned from the school of hard knocks. Those instincts of his were now working overtime as he pieced everything together. "That's right, Uzumaki-san," Kakashi said, correctly interpreting the look of dawning comprehension on Naruto's face. "I'm here to recruit you." The piece of unagi between the two chopsticks didn't seem to make its way to his mouth. He replaced the chopsticks back on his plate, as he stared hard at Kakashi, all cheerfulness gone. "Is this a joke?" he demanded. "I assure you I have never been more serious." Kakashi assured him, his tone graver than it had been all night. "Why on earth would you want a genin washout in a team which has been known to churn out legends?" Naruto remarked, "If these are the standards we're setting, I'd be really worried for Konoha." "You seem to have a remarkably low opinion of your skills," Kakashi countered, "and of me as well if you think I didn't do my homework on you. You were after all Jiraiya's apprentice." Naruto held the gaze of Kakashi's lone eye, ignoring the stab of pain in his heart at the mention of his old sensei's name and focusing on the implications of the words. Only one other knew of his association with the now dead Sannin, and Kakashi coming here meant he was in their confidence. But he chose to hold his silence for now, letting the man speak. During his years of travel, Jiraiya had managed to create the most sophisticated information network the Elemental Nations has ever seen, Kakashi said. A network which served Konoha well, while he was alive. A network which now lies dormant. "So that's why you want me? You're the only one alive who knows how it operates." That confirmed it. A big game was afoot here and the stakes were high. The network Jiraiya had painstakingly created was totally independent of the official Konoha network. The sheer complexity and intricacy of the thing was an art in itself. He had hoped it would never be needed. "Believe it or not, in some ways you'll be the most important part of this team," Kakashi said gravely. "It's not a bad gig. You'll formally be a part of a team, running high-ranked mission, not to mention a chance to rise through the ranks." Naruto could hardly believe what he was hearing. Barely an hour ago he was lamenting his luck for being unable to go on higher-ranked missions, and now he was being asked to be a part of the greatest one. Well, potentially anyway. There were concerns. A lot of them in fact, but at the moment he couldn't bring himself to care. He was about to be part of a team. That was all that mattered. In that case, Naruto closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were shining with their usual mirth. "How can I refuse? So when do I meet the rest of the team? Actually, the team isn't complete yet." Kakashi's tone reverted back to its cheerful tenor. "As your first assignment, I need you to recruit the last member." "Me?" Naruto blinked owlishly at Kakashi as he registered his words. "Why on earth would you want me to do that?" "Because Naruto-kun, I believe you are the best man for the job." Kakashi handed the bewildered genin a folder. Naruto opened it with some trepidation. His eyes widened when he studied its contents. No way. Shikamaru reached the assigned spot at 8 a.m. Almost an hour before he was told to get there. The reasons for getting there early had nothing to do with his eagerness for the new job, but rather, as hard as it was to believe, his own laziness. It was something he had worked out when he was barely a month into his stint at the academy. After weeks of being pestered by his mother into getting ready for classes, he had decided to avoid the entire hassle by getting up early and reaching the academy an hour early. It gave him time to sleep uninterrupted till the instructor made it to the class. It also had the added benefit of getting his mother off his back, who was now proud of her son's enthusiasm towards his education and dedication to the shinobi life. A fact she never failed to regale her husband and friends with. His old man, unlike his mother however, wasn't fooled and knew exactly what he was up to. But he never made a big deal, or rather any deal, out of it. A fact he was thankful for, at least in the beginning anyway. The man had then proceeded to exploit this leverage, over his own son, by getting him to do his share of chores around the house. At times he wondered if carrying on the charade was worth it. But there were few things he loved more than his morning nap, a fact his father was fully aware of, so he decided to play along, begrudgingly, waiting for the day he'd have some dirt over his dad. But the man was more crafty and devious than he gave him credit for, and despite his best efforts he failed miserably. So he had decided that trying to find decent blackmail material on his father was more trouble than it was worth, and things continued as they were till the day he graduated the academy. A part of him did wonder what he was doing here. He had been discharged, for crying out loud. He was content in his empty and miserable existence. So the question remained. The answer wasn't something he had to ponder too hard over. Naruto Uzumaki. 2 days ago. Tobarama Senju Park, Konoha. 11:06 a.m. Shikamaru studied the 3 shugi boards in front of him. 2 of his opponents were men in their 50s and the third just a couple of years older. The games were on their 15th, 18th and 21st move respectively. The length of the game had little to do with the prowess of his adversaries though. He could have finished each of those games within the 20 moves. But this also happened to be one of his steady sources of income. If people realized how good he really was, no one would play him ever again. Pragmatism before pride was one of the mottos he lived by. He'd lose a game here and there, to keep things interesting and to attract more opponents. He gave good odds to them too, most of the time in their favor. So then why was he showing off by playing 3 of them at the same time? The short answer would be money, 10,000 ryo to be precise. That kind of dough was nothing to sneeze at. Focusing on the game, he finished all 3 before 30 moves. The crowd which had gathered around the players dispersed. "Good game, kid," one of his challengers patted him on the back good-naturedly, while handing him the cash. The other 2 were a little more sour, but paid nevertheless. He was here for the money, not the goodwill anyway. Shikamaru couldn't help the smirk on his face as he collected his winnings. It was almost too easy. "Hey, how about a game with me?" Shikamaru turned to the source of the voice to see a blonde guy grinning like an idiot at him, as if seeing him was the best thing that happened to him in ages. "I only play for money," he remarked. The blonde wasn't discouraged though as he reached into his pocket to fish out some money. A few crumpled notes and some coins were all he could manage. "I have got 10 ryo, he said, counting his money as he placed it on the table. After his recent windfall, he really wasn't eager for a game for a meager 10 ryo. But he and the new arrival had a history of sorts, and he was the only guy in Konoha who could lay claim to having Shikamaru in his debt. "Take a seat then and I will set the board," Shikamaru sighed. "You can take black." A few moves into the game, Shikamaru decided that he had waited enough. "What are you doing here, Naruto? You hate Shugi. I came here to see how you were doing, Shika." Naruto moved his knight, challenging Shika's rook. "It's been what, 3 years? 3 years 4 months and 15 days. He moved his own knight, threatening Naruto's bishop, and cut the bullshit, will you?" "But who's counting?" Naruto remarked dryly, moving his bishop, getting it out of the danger zone. "I've been assigned a team." "Congratulations," he said, and removed one of Naruto's vulnerable rooks with one of his own. "Thanks," he said, a little disgruntled about losing a powerful piece, but tried to bolster his defenses by moving a pawn. "What did you say if I told you that as my first assignment I have to recruit you?" "I'd say someone is yanking your chain." He moved his bishop to take Naruto's knight. "Check." "Why'd someone like Kakashi Hitaki yank my chain?" Naruto tried to salvage some pride by taking one of his rooks. "I don't know. Why'd someone like Kakashi want you in his team at all?" The veiled insult failed to dampen Naruto's enthusiasm as he merely smirked at Shikamaru as if he knew something that he didn't. "I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you." "How long have you waited to say that?" "Nearly my whole life." That explains it," Shikamaru said as he moved his last move, "and that's checkmate." "What?" Naruto stared at the board disbelievingly. "Already?" Shikamaru shrugged as he began collecting the pieces and the money. "Come on, Shika," Naruto whined. "If you want a rematch, come back tomorrow." "I meant you joining the team." "First of all, I'm not buying it." He was beginning to get annoyed now. "Secondly, I've been discharged. Dishonorably, if you remember. So what makes you think I'd want to, even if I could?" Naruto sighed heavily at his words. "What happened during that mission wasn't your fault, Shika. I've said it before and I will say it again. But that's not why I am here today." Naruto took a deep breath and met his gaze. "I have a feeling that whatever I am walking into right now is going to get extremely hairy. So what I am trying to say is that I would feel a lot better if you were there to watch my back." And just like that, a matter Shikamaru hadn't even bothered giving a second thought to, became the biggest decision to ever be taken by him. Naruto then handed him a scroll. "These are your reassignment papers," Naruto explained. "All you gotta to do is sign them and you will be reinstated as a chunin in the Konoha Shinobi Corps." Shikamaru stared blankly at the scroll he had been handed. His usually sharp mind was for the first time in a long time at a loss to process any of this. "I can't go through that again, Naruto," he called out to the retreating back of his once comrade, his voice breaking. "It'll be different this time, Shika," the blonde said without turning around. "I promise." Having played that meeting over and over in his head, Shikamaru wondered if there was any way he could have gotten himself out of his current situation. Part of him admired Naruto for having maneuvered him to right where he was, another resented him for having managed to do it. He was supposed to be the genius, goddammit. But despite his feelings on the matter, this deserved a look in. The scroll in his pocket felt rather heavy. He hadn't signed it yet. He needed to make sure that this wasn't some elaborate hoax first. He didn't want to be conned into something he could have avoided with a little circumspection after all. All of this seemed too good to be true. As much as he hated to admit it, he had been proud of being a shinobi. Despite his less than stellar performance at the academy, he had managed to be the first in his class to attain the rank of chunin. The day he was dishonorably discharged had been one of the darkest days of his life. The only reason it wasn't the darkest was because of the reason for his discharge. His experiences with stuff like that had driven some hard-hitting life lessons into him. Lessons which came at a really heavy price. So now when he was offered what he had lost, he wanted to see the strings attached to that present. A presence in the field broke him out of thoughts. He didn't bother moving or even opening his eyes. Whoever it was, they weren't hostile. He wasn't moving from his place unless he had to. The person, whoever it was, moved closer till they were standing right over him. "Shikamaru?" A girl's voice, vaguely familiar, called out to him as if they couldn't quite believe themselves. "Is that really you?" Finally, not having the excuse to keep up the charade of being asleep, he opened one eye to study his companion. He was greeted by the sight of pink hair and green eyes. Sakura Haruno, the name came to his lips almost involuntarily. "Are you here for the same reason I am?" "I don't know." Sakura eyed him rather suspiciously. "Why are you here?" To be fair, Shikamaru really hadn't expected that blatant attempt to gather information work, especially not on someone like Sakura. But it was worth a try, and her evasive response had answered his question anyway. "I'm here to meet a friend," he replied truthfully, kinda. Naruto qualified as a friend, he supposed, though he definitely was unlike any he ever had. "A friend?" Sakura said skeptically, folding her arms as she towered over his prone form. "In a ninja training ground?" "Well, that must mean my friend must be a ninja, doesn't it?" he said nonchalantly, closing his eyes back again. Despite his closed eyes, he could feel the girl's gaze trying to bore a hole through him. He could literally hear the gears turning in her head, as she tried to deduce the reasons for his presence there. All of which pertained to rather sensitive issues. Eventually her fidgeting was too much for him. "I got reinstated," he said, deciding to put the girl out of her misery, not really elaborating that he hadn't accepted yet. "Oh," Sakura said, apparently satisfied, but now left with even more questions she wasn't sure how to put forward. "Well, too bad." The two of them fell into a more comfortable, if still a little awkward, silence. They belonged to the same batch in the academy, that's how they knew each other. To say they were friends would have been a gross exaggeration though. They were casual acquaintances, if even that. He only knew her as one of Ino's lackeys. So it wasn't really surprising that they had avoided each other's radars altogether. Not anymore, it seemed. "So, who's this friend you're meeting?" she asked him. "Uzumaki Naruto," he said, not really knowing how to skirt around a direct question like that. Besides, if he was being honest, maybe the sentiment will be reciprocated. "So what about you? Who are you waiting for?" Sakura considered him for a moment before seemingly making up her mind. "I'm waiting for my Junin commander," she said. "Before you ask, no, I don't know him. I was just assigned and told to report here." "Maybe someone played a practical joke on you," he ventured. "I don't think the Hokage has a sense of humor," she snapped irritably at him. "Oh, okay." Well, the plot thickened. Whatever this team was, apparently the Hokage had a stake in its formation. When Naruto had dropped Kakashi's name, he hadn't really believed it. Now with Sakura implying what she was, some of his old worries dissipated, but as was often the case, new ones took their place. Whatever was going down, it was big. Last time he had bitten off more than he could chew, it really hadn't ended well. Maybe he should walk away while he still had the chance. "So, who is this Naruto Uzumaki anyway?" Sakura queried, planting herself on the ground not far from him. "Not anyone you'd know," Shikamaru answered. "He graduated a couple of batches before us." "And how do you know him?" "Seriously, what's with the interrogation?" he barked. "Can't you just wait till whoever it is that you're waiting for comes?" Sakura's face burned red with indignation and embarrassment. "Gee, sorry if my questions got too personal," she retorted, before pulling her knees to her chin and wrapping her arms around them. She was now facing away from him. Shikamaru sighed. Troublesome woman making him feel guilty. "He was part of the mission I led as a chunin," he explained somewhat reluctantly, "before I was let go." He saw Sakura's back stiffen before slowly turning around. her green eyes filled with pity and sorrow as she seemed to understand why he reacted the way he did. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. He had led only one team during his tragically brief stint as a Chunin. "I'm sorry, Shikamaru," she said. "Don't worry about it." He waved off her apology while trying to ignore his own pain at the same time. "You didn't know." Fortunately, he was relieved of the need to dispel the tension as the topic of their conversation chose to make his presence. "Hey Shika," the blonde called out as he walked in greeting him, in all of his orange glory while still 20 yards away from him. To complete the picture, there was a half-eaten rice ball in his hand. "You're here early." Whoa. Shikamaru wondered what could have possibly stopped him halfway through a sentence, when he realized Naruto was now openly gaping at Sakura as if not quite sure what he was seeing. Sakura fidgeted uncomfortably as she withstood his gaze. She turned to Shika as if to ask what his deal was, before the blonde finally opened his mouth to speak. Years from now he would regret not being able to record this moment as Naruto said his first words to Sakura. "Wow, that almost looks natural," he exclaimed, his voice full of awe. "What did you do to get that color?" Sakura was stunned. In all her life she had never met a guy as blunt as the one who was managing a pretty impressive impersonation of a fish at the moment. Even when she had started the academy, her classmates had refrained from making fun of the rather unusual color of her hair. So shocked was she by his tactless inquiry that all she could do was mutter incoherently for a while before finally saying, "Excuse me? I'm digging your style," the guy told her. "I never thought anyone could pull it off, but I have to admit you do it rather well." Now Sakura wasn't sure if she should be pleased or outraged. It didn't look like the blonde was joking or being malicious, despite what his goofy appearance suggested. Eventually she decided even if he wasn't making fun of her, fashion approval from an orange-wearing moron couldn't possibly be good. So, outraged it was. "This is my natural color," she said through gritted teeth. "Wow, really?" The boy remained awestruck, seemingly oblivious to the dam of righteous feminine fury about to explode all over him. "Damn. I was really hoping you had dyed it, but anyway, I am Naruto Uzumaki." Sakura looked at the proffered hand suspiciously, before shooting Shikamaru a look which screamed, "Is this guy serious?" Shikamaru just shrugged. Sakura would never know how hard he had been trying to hold back his laughter. One of the reasons for his non-verbal gesture was that he really didn't trust himself to speak, afraid he'd lose it completely. "And I think you should come down. Waiting there can't possibly be comfortable." Naruto spoke again, this time apparently to the trees lining the training ground, not giving Sakura a chance to respond. A few seconds later, when nothing happened, Sakura decided the guy had a few loose nuts and Shikamaru's theory about this being a practical joke making more sense by the second. "Come on, man," he called out again, already losing interest in Sakura. "You're making me look bad here." Could this guy get any weirder? Sakura thought to herself. She took a deep breath, ready to tear into the guy, when finally a figure walked out of the tree line, glaring at the blonde. Sakura gasped and even Shikamaru gave a grunt of recognition. Approaching them was none other than Uchiha Sasuke. Even 15 minutes ago, if someone had told Sasuke that one day he'd meet someone who can be more obnoxious than Kakashi, he'd have laughed in their face, saying such a thing couldn't be possible. It's funny how drastically your worldview can change in a few minutes. This just hadn't been his week. It had started out well enough though. He had successfully eliminated the missing nin he was after on Monday after cornering them near a hot spring in Kusa. No witnesses and no hassles whatsoever. He'd then gone on to take some downtime in that town. The journey back had been inconsequential, and so come Wednesday he couldn't be faulted for not knowing what was waiting for him back home. Long story short, he'd been literally fired from ANBU and then reinstated as a part of the regular corps under Kakashi of all people. On Thursday, however, he'd played off the events of Wednesday as a figment of his imagination when he went to the ANBU HQ, where he was promptly told at the very first checkpoint that his security clearance had been revoked. He'd not taken that well. Nearly an hour of repeated pleading, shouting and threatening had failed to yield any positive results, and on seeing the guard's finger itching towards his stun baton, he had finally accepted his fate and trudged back home, awaiting the next day when he could finally wring Kakashi's neck. On Friday he placed himself in prime ambush position, out of sight in the cluster of trees surrounding the training ground. It was only then that he belatedly recalled Kakashi's habit of being late. To his surprise, however, he hadn't even been the first one there. It was Nara Shikamaru who had beaten him to it. A guy he knew from his academy days. Strange. He had been sure the guy had been discharged. Then to his dismay, Sakura Haruno, another one of his ex-classmates, entered the field. These were people he was sure he wouldn't have to deal with ever again. He forced himself to calm down. It was possible that she was here for a purpose other than what he was here for. Though he had a feeling he was being overly optimistic. It was almost time and no one else seemed to be coming. Plus, if he was to be a part of a three-man cell, he had a feeling that he was looking at his future teammates. He heard snatches of their conversation. Apparently he hadn't been mistaken about Shikamaru being kicked out of the shinobi program. But the guy claimed he had been reinstated. Sasuke wondered how he had managed that. At least things couldn't get worse, he had told himself. He'd be kicking himself in a little while. The reason for that made its presence made known. Literally, he could see him coming him from a mile away. His orange clothes and blonde hair would have stood out in an open market. In an empty field, the contrast was even more glaring. Well, to be fair, the guy wasn't exactly trying to hide himself. He had even greeted Shikamaru from across half the field. A part of Sasuke couldn't help feeling relieved though. That made three, maybe this wasn't to be his team after all. He even managed to enjoy the interaction which succeeded, between the blonde guy and the girl. His comments had left Sakura gaping like a fish and almost completely speechless. But then something strange happened. The blonde looked straight at his hiding place and spoke. "And I think you should come down, waiting there can't possibly be comfortable." Sasuke was shocked. Not since his early days as an ANBU trainee had he been made out as easily as he had just been right now. He waited, maybe he was calling out to his cat or something. "No such luck. Come on man," he said when he didn't receive a response. "You're making me look bad here." Reluctantly and more than a little bewildered, he came out of his hiding place, gaining a gasp of recognition from Sakura. "You guys know each other?" he said, evidently not missing the reaction of his companions to Sasuke's appearance. "Sasuke Uchiha used to be our classmate." Shikamaru answered his query. "Uchiha huh?" Sasuke could see the dots connecting in the blonde's eyes. "Well, I guess I'm the only one who needs to be introduced then," the blonde said. "I'm not interested." Sasuke interrupted him. Seriously, did this guy ever shut up? He was beginning to give him a headache. The blonde paused mid-sentence, studying Sasuke wearing a thoroughly confused expression and his hand extended in an offer of a handshake, before he turned to Sakura. Sakura, who still seemed to be recovering from Sasuke's sudden appearance, belatedly realized she was the one Naruto was addressing. "What?" she asked dazedly. "Look, I don't know what your deal is." Sasuke said irritably. "I am here to see Kakashi Hitaki, so it will be better if we can ignore each other till he gets here." He didn't like the sparkle that entered the blonde's eyes at those words. He liked what he said next even less. "Well, so are we," he said, "at least me and Shikamaru are. What about you?" he added as an afterthought, addressing Sakura. Sakura for the first time realized she didn't know who her Junin commander was supposed to be. She had been told to be here, and like a good soldier she was. She had absolutely no idea who they were. She doubted though that she'd be on team with these guys, not if what Naruto was saying was true anyway. A regular team consisted of 3 shinobi. The boys were here to meet the same Junin, that left her as the odd one out. Maybe she was waiting in the wrong place. "I don't know, I'm supposed to meet my new team here." Whatever. Sasuke was beginning to lose interest as he turned to put some distance between him and the others. "Don't bother me till he gets here then, and you better brace yourself. We will be waiting a while." "What do you mean?" Shikamaru asked, a little mystified. But Sasuke had said all he wanted to say, and moved himself away from the others, to stand and lean on one of the training posts, doing his best to ignore them. "That guy was your classmate? What a douche," Naruto remarked. "After that incident, he became an arrogant anti-social jerk." Shikamaru explained. "What was he like before?" "An arrogant anti-social jerk. Figures. Give him a break, okay?" Sakura said impatiently, coming to Sasuke's defense. Shikamaru glared at Sakura for a while, wanting to give her a piece of his mind, before deciding it wasn't worth the trouble he would be subjecting himself to. He simply lay back down, placing an arm over his eyes. "Wake me up when he gets here." Naruto and Sakura stood around a little awkwardly in the silence, before Sakura decided to squat down on the field, Naruto soon imitating her. "I haven't caught your name yet." "Sakura Haruno." She answered the blonde, in the hopes it will shut him up. Haruno? Naruto mused. Any relation to Kazashi Haruno? How do you know my father? Sakura asked despite herself. He led a bunch of us during the invasion to defend the southern sector, he said good-naturedly waving his hands. I remember seeing him fight and wishing I could do half the things he did. Sakura remembered. Her father had received a glowing commendation from the Junin commander himself for his exemplary conduct during the invasion. His actions had prevented the reinforcements of the enemy from getting to the center of the village, something which later proved decisive in turning the tide against them. What made it even more impressive was that he had made that stand against an enemy, which outnumbered his forces of mostly genin by 6-1. Why aren't you wearing your Chunin vest? She changed the subject. As proud as she was of her father, he was a topic she would rather avoid. The Hokage is holding it for me, eagerly awaiting the day I can take it off of her hands. Naruto said. Sakura felt like kicking herself. In trying to get the conversation out of awkward waters, she had probably made things worse, because despite the blonde's joking tone, she could hear the hint of bitterness coloring it. So you're a medic, huh? He said, pointing to the insignia of a slug just over the official Konoha symbol which endorsed the back of her Chunin vest. Yeah, Sakura said offhandedly, what about it? That's really cool. Her expression softened. Being a medic was something Sakura took a lot of pride in. One of the first things Tsunade had done on being appointed as Hokage was revive the dwindling state of Konoha's medical program. Within 6 months of her arrival, she had overhauled the entire system. The results were for everyone to see. Konoha now had 1 medic nin for every 6 shinobi. While it was still some way from her goal of 1 for every 4, it was way better than the 1:13 ratio that was prevalent when she had taken up the mantle. The symbol of the slug was worn with pride by the members of the medical corps. Wow, so you must be some sort of genius, huh? Sakura tried to listen for any trace of condescension or jealousy in his voice. She found none. Despite the sort of weird beginning, she had to admit she was beginning to enjoy his company. This wasn't the first time someone had praised her or gushed about her, but it had always been done mostly out of politeness or professional courtesy. Then there were those who were all smiles while congratulating her on her achievements while poorly concealing their envy. Very rarely had she encountered the sincerity that Naruto was displaying. This was also the first time since her ill-fated mission when someone wasn't trying to treat her like a delicate sculpture. Well, she said, trying to be as modest as she could, when they were interrupted again. At least 2 of you are trying to bond. The high-pitched squeal of surprise she heard she'd later learn had come from her. But what amazed her was Naruto's reaction, who was now perched atop a training post, with his kunai drawn. Even Shikamaru had jerked awake with a start and Sasuke just glared balefully at the newest presence. You're late, Kakashi. Naruto dismounted from the post as if it was something he did on a regular basis. Thought this was supposed to be important. Am I now? Lost track. The man seemed totally unaffected by the chaos he had caused, merely turning a page of the paperback he was perusing. So this is Kakashi, Sakura thought to herself, after getting her heart rate to somewhat normal levels. She had never felt so underwhelmed. She knew him by sight, almost everyone in the village did, and so did most of the shinobi world. But then with his trademark silver hair and the Konoha headband over one eye, not to mention the mask, he did stand out. Well, the man shut the book and pocketed it. I see everyone's here. And then some, Sasuke said, still glaring at the Junin. Sakura realized that the comment was directed at her and shot him an irritated look. She tried to defend the guy, but he always made it so hard. Now Sasuke, that's hardly the way to talk about your new comrades. Kakashi said placatingly. What are you playing at, Kakashi? Sasuke folded his arms, turning his full attention to the Junin. A standard cell consists of 4 members. There are 5 of us here, so unless you're telling me that 2 of these losers actually combined to have the competence of 1, I'm getting out of here. Empty threats, Sasuke. The Junin's voice retained its usual casual tenor. But Sakura suddenly felt the temperature drop a couple of degrees. You'll be here for as long as I want you to be. Sasuke's didn't relax his aggressive stance, but kept his mouth shut. Even Naruto seemed to be affected as he shifted his weight uneasily on the balls of his feet. The 5 of them stood in tense silence, following Kakashi's declaration in a standoff of sorts. So, let's commence what we are here for, shall we? Kakashi said cheerfully. As of today, you guys are now part of Team 7. You're kidding. Why does everyone keep saying that? Kakashi responded to Sasuke's comment, no, I'm not. Starting Monday we embark on missions under the direct authority of the Hokage. So what are we supposed to do for the rest of the day? Naruto wondered aloud. That's up to you, Kakashi replied, pulling out his book again. That's it? Sakura voiced her own thoughts. Yup, came the reply, move along now, and assemble at the mission desk on Monday, 8 a.m. sharp. More than a little confused, Sakura tentatively turned around, to follow the Junin's command. Sasuke had already made himself scarce and was nowhere in sight now. Even Shikamaru was trudging out. But Naruto remained rooted to the spot, glaring at the Junin, or rather at what he was reading. Is that Icha Icha Battle Series Volume 7? He questioned him. Why yes it is. The man seemed pleasantly surprised. You're a fan, I take it. Quite the opposite in fact. Naruto said, I happen to know it's trashy smut. Do you now? Kakashi said absent-mindedly, losing his interest in the conversation now that he knew Naruto wasn't a fan. I'm assuming your low opinion of it didn't stop you from actually reading it. Oh, I didn't read it, Naruto assured the Junin before walking away and muttering under his breath, making sure that he couldn't listen to what he had to say next. I wrote it. Shikamaru was making his way home after being dismissed, going over the events of the day. It had been unexpected to say the least. Years after his greatest failure as a shinobi, he was now made a part of a team led by a living legend no less. While the composition of the team didn't inspire much confidence, the fact that it was happening at all said a lot. Just what was going on in here? Nothing seemed to make sense. You don't mind if I join you, do you? He turned to the source of the voice to see their team leader joining him, his nose buried in his book. It's a free country. Shikamaru shrugged. What's on your mind, Kakashi-san? A lot of things, Nara-san. A lot of things, he replied, but there's only one which concerns you at the moment. It's about time you made up your mind, isn't it? I'd just like to know a little more of what I'm getting into, before I make a decision. Shikamaru didn't bother denying him knowing what Kakashi was talking about. Shinobi don't have that luxury. It's a good thing that I'm not a shinobi then, isn't it? You can never stop being a shinobi, Nara-san, Kakashi countered. The day you graduated the academy your fate was sealed. I'm not wearing a headband, he refuted, that makes me a civilian and I never gave much thought to the philosophical bullshit you're spouting. It's too troublesome. Kakashi stopped and so did Shikamaru. Both men faced each other in a showdown of sorts. Why don't you come with me, Nara-san? He said, there is something I'd like to show you. Shikamaru weighed the Junin's words. This wasn't a command, not even a concealed one. It was a genuine request. He realized what the man was doing. If it had been an order Shikamaru could have refused, probably would have too. But a request on the other hand played on his curiosity. So with that knowledge in hand he did what he knew he should do. It was still his choice after all. Lead the way, he told the man. Shikamaru stared at the pile of boxes in front of him, raising an eyebrow at Kakashi, wondering what this was about. They were currently at the Hokage Tower, or to be precise at the mission desk. The place housed 50 Chunins at any given time, working tirelessly to classify missions based on their importance and threat level. Kakashi had requested a workstation and rallied some instructions to one of them and was promptly assigned one. It wasn't long before the same Chunin came bearing 3 boxes stacked on top of each other filled with files and dumped them on the table. The man could barely see over the stacks and the heavy thump the boxes made on the table was indicative of their rather impressive weight. What's this? Shikamaru asked the Junin. Every month, Konoha receives hundreds of missions between the ranks of B and C. Kakashi opened the lid of one of the boxes and studied the contents. Statistically, almost 5% of these missions are misclassified, something which should interest you given your history. Shikamaru kept his mouth shut, despite the Junin's blunt manner of speaking, and let him continue. The reasons for these errors range from clerical errors to misinformation by the clients themselves. He elaborated, it won't be wrong to say that because of these errors we have lost a lot of good shinobi on the field, not to mention the strain it puts on our resources. Now we can't go on and penalize the clients, doesn't make us look good. We do what we can to make sure to minimize them at the mission desk, but we haven't had much success. Kakashi flicked through one of the files before replacing it and reaching for another one. Hokage-sama wants to work out a system where this doesn't remain a problem. He folded his arms and met Shikamaru's eyes, which is where you come in. Why now? Shikamaru questioned the Junin. If it has been that big a problem, Why hasn't anything been done yet? We had to act sometime, Kakashi said. What you've to understand is why this problem has flown under the radar. These low-ranked missions are taken up by low-ranked shinobi, manly genin or chunin, who aren't all that important to the big picture. Shikamaru failed to keep the bitterness out of his voice. Yeah, I get it. Who cares if a few grunts lose their lives because of carelessness on the desk of a glorified clerk? Regardless, Kakashi continued, ignoring his last comment, the losses are something the Hokage feels kid and should be avoided. So you want me to devise a system to weed out these potential death traps? Shikamaru said, following the thread of the conversation. Yes and no. Kakashi said, yes, we want to filter them, but we can't reject them either. Doesn't make us look good with the clients. Shikamaru interrupted, I get it. The missions which you filter out will be then handed to a team which is equipped to handle them. Kakashi concluded. In this case I am guessing it's Team 7. That's right. Why Team 7 though? Shikamaru asked the man. What do you mean? You could have christened us Team 47 and achieved the same results. He said, so, why Team 7? If it's under the direct authority of the Hokage, it's less likely to be influenced by other forces. Kakashi shrugged, won't you agree, Nara-san? So let me get this straight. Shikamaru took a deep breath. That explanation on its face sounded good enough, but he was done taking things at face value. He decided to press forward with a different concern though. You want me to devise a way to sieve through misclassified missions, to prevent unnecessary field casualties only for them to be taken by a team which consists of my acquaintances. He wanted to say friends, but Naruto was the closest thing he had to one in this team. While he cared little about Sakura and not a damn about Sasuke, still they were people he knew. That's exactly what I want you to do. How is one team expected to handle all these missions? Shikamaru prodded, if what you're saying is true, you will need more than one squad. I'm not saying it's perfect. Kakashi admitted, but this is just the start. If we succeed, we will expand. In that case, he sighed, I am going to say no. I'd beg you to reconsider. There is nothing to reconsider. Shikamaru said, I won't have another death on my conscience. So thanks Kakashi-san, but no thanks. On the contrary, Nara-san. Kakashi said, freezing Shikamaru in his place as he had started to walk away. If you walk away now, you'd be responsible for every death which results from your inaction. How dare you? Shikamaru hissed venomously, turning around to face him. I dare, because few are gifted with the ability to change things and even fewer are afforded the opportunity to do so. You've been given both, but you're walking away because you're too much of a coward to take any responsibility. Kakashi refused to back down. You want to make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else? This is your chance. Shikamaru had never been so angry in his life. He clenched his fist hard enough for his nails to break skin, using the pain to control himself. I'm done here, Shikamaru said coldly before turning around and storming out of the tower, leaving the Chunin around baffled. Kakashi watched the Chunin walk away, thoroughly satisfied with the results of that encounter. What came next would be a less pleasant experience by far. Reporting to the Hokage. So he walked away. He did. You knew he would. I was counting on it. Tsunade Senju rubbed her forehead with her fingers, trying to abate the headache building up behind her temples. This man was the best she had and one of the only ones she could trust. She considered herself a fairly straightforward person, and Kakashi's games got too much sometimes even for her. Enlighten me, Kakashi, she said bitingly. How's that a good thing? Kakashi's posture was slouched and his manner lazy and languid. To a casual observer he wouldn't appear to be anything but relaxed. The absence of his favorite book, however, was a telltale sign of how seriously he was taking it. He wouldn't be worth the effort if he didn't. He even saw through things I wasn't expecting him to. Seeing the signs of danger on his boss's face, he continued hurriedly. Regardless, he will be back of that, I'm sure. I gave you a long leash on this one, Hitaki, Tsunade stated. Even overlooked the fact that you broke protocol by telling a civilian the details of a sensitive operation, something which should have had you court-martialed, mind you. So you better be right about this, because if he doesn't, it will be on your head. Trust me on this, Hokage-sama. If this venture of yours is to succeed, we'll need him. The man told her. Moreover, knowing what he does now, he won't be able to walk away from this. No, I'm not worried about Shikamaru. The rest, however, I'm not so sure. What do you mean? The Junin's statement caught her completely off guard. Well, how do I put this delicately? Kakashi mused out loud. The way Team 7 is right now, they are about as functional as a defective explosive tag. Location: ANBU HQ, Special Ops Division. Time: 4:30 p.m. A heavily bandaged one-armed and one-eyed man sat behind a rather imposing but simple desk. The room was dark without a window. The only source of light was a dim light bulb hanging overhead. Just how he preferred it. The roots after all had no use for the sun, he mused sardonically while intently studying the files as one of his subordinates crouched in a gesture of supplication on one knee with his head bowed. He had been in that position for over 10 minutes now. The man, however, paid little attention to the plight of his subordinate. He had bigger worries at the moment. Tsunade had made her move, it seemed. Monitor the situation closely, he told his crouched minion, and keep me of any new developments. Hi, Danzo-sama, the man intoned as he got to his feet and dismissed himself. So now you're on the same team as Sasuke? Her blonde best friend stated dubiously, as if trying to process what she'd been told, not to mention Shikamaru too. Sakura nodded, smirking mischievously, sipping her drink, enjoying the look on Ino's face, despite herself. Both of them had nurtured a crush on Sasuke during their academy days along with half the girls in their batch. They even had developed something of rivalry over the Uchiha's affections. It had crushed them both when he hadn't ended up in their teams, and chose to take cold comfort in the fact that at least the other didn't get the proximity to the handsome boy they both craved. Until now. So what's he like these days? Ino leaned forward, interest shining in her eyes. Taller, lethal, Sakura said, and better looking than ever. Come on, Ino whined, more details, girl. It was Friday evening of the day of Sakura's first team meeting, to be precise. She had backed out of Ino's planned girls' night out the other day, citing the excuse of an early morning team meeting, which eventually turned into a noon rendezvous thanks to the late arrival of their Junin leader. This was her way of making it up to her. The place was an outdoor cafe opened quite recently. The two kunoichi were seated on the roof, which offered a pristine view of the village market. They chatted animatedly for a while, talking about their academy days, old crushes, mainly Sasuke, and the life after in general. It was sobering how things had changed. There was a time when the very mention of Sasuke in their presence was like striking a match in a gas-filled room. Now it was merely a part of their innocent if somewhat immature past. When was the last time you spoke to Shikamaru? Sakura asked her. Only once, after he got discharged. Ino sighed, the cheerful mood of their meeting turning somewhat sour at the mention of her estranged teammate. That wasn't a pleasant encounter, and I didn't seek him out afterwards. Ino paused, a little bit of uncertainty coloring her tone as she spoke again. How's he? Not bad, all things considered. Sakura leaned back on her chair. He's the same, lazy and languid guy we knew back in the day. By the way, do you know anyone by the name of Uzumaki Naruto? Can't say I do. Spiky blonde, blue eyes, loud orange clothes. Sakura described him, whiskers on face. If I didn't know better, I'd say he was related to you. No Yamanaka would be caught dead in orange. Ino rolled her eyes. Anything you want to confess, Sakura? It was Sakura's turn to roll her eyes at the hidden implication in Ino's teasing voice. It was time to nip it in the bud, before it got hold of her. Nothing like that, Sakura said. He's just another member assigned to my team. Wait. Realization dawned on Ino's pretty features, and this new info distracted her from teasing her friend. You're a 5-member cell, how does that work? Sakura knew this was coming. While teams of 5 or more weren't unusual, they were only used temporarily for higher-ranked missions or missions requiring greater manpower like border patrols or merchant convoy escorts, but never as permanent cells. I don't know, Ino, Sakura admitted before trying to get the conversation back on track, but that wasn't what I was talking about. Then what were you talking about? He was on the mission with Shikamaru, she said. You know which one I am talking about. To say that the aftermath of that mission had been devastating would be an understatement. Not only to Shikamaru, but personally to Sakura, and even more so to Ino. Frankly, she could understand him falling off the grid afterwards. But they had recovered, Shikamaru obviously hadn't yet. Yeah, I remember. Understanding dawned on her face, followed immediately by anger. But he wasn't kicked off the force, was he? Sakura was a little taken aback by the venom in Ino's voice. She probably didn't appreciate the fact that Shikamaru was the only one who bore the consequences of that failed mission. Part of Sakura could understand her frustration, but she didn't believe it was Naruto's fault, and blaming him for not being punished was petty. Except that probably wasn't true. He was stuck as a genin when most shinobi his age had at the very least attained the rank of chunin. But she kept those thoughts to herself, not really wanting to antagonize Ino over a guy she barely knew despite not agreeing with her. While he's been reinstated, Sakura tried to draw Ino's attention to that fact, so, there's that at least. I suppose you're right, Ino muttered gloomily. The conversation soon drifted to more mundane topics after this. But Ino's mood had obviously been spoiled and it didn't take long for the two kunoichi to say goodbyes and go their different ways. Sakura struggled with herself for a moment before making up her mind. She followed the street which took her away from her home instead of towards it, fingering the piece of paper Inoichi had handed her during their last session. She had never been to that particular sector of the village, but from the looks of it, it was located in one of the better-off neighborhoods, probably the merchant class. Little kids laughing hysterically as they chased each other down the streets lining quaint little houses and painted picket fences. It was the pleasant kind of place where people bought homes and raised families. She wondered why Inoichi'd her to come here. She stopped in front of the house she was supposed to go. It looked exactly the same as the rest in the colony. For a second she wondered if she was in the wrong place. A quick look at her watch told her that it was more than 5:30. She was late. She raised her hand to knock on the door to announce her presence. Her hand was only inches away from the door when it almost involuntarily clenched itself into a fist, following which it slowly dropped by her side. As she walked away, only one thought resonated in her mind. She wasn't ready. Not yet. I'm coming, I'm coming. Naruto shouted as he hastily threw on a pair of black shorts and an old white t-shirt he had outgrown a couple of years ago. The knocking on his apartment door was only getting more insistent and impatient. He'd been in the shower for crying out loud, which was a little unusual for him. By now he should have been out of the apartment and at the mission desk taking his pick of D ranks. But recent events had led to some rather welcome developments, as starting next week he'd be part of a team and eligible for the higher tier of and better paying missions. So for the first time since his academy days he had actually allowed himself to sleep in, ordered his breakfast from the place down the street and was in the middle of a shower when his morning was disturbed by a series of rather loud knocks, which, if he didn't know better, could be mistaken for the Konoha military police trying to apprehend a suspect by breaking down the door. It was strange as he wasn't expecting any visitors. His bills were paid, mostly anyway, and, well, no, that was it. It was sad that the only people he dealt with any regularity in his life were people he owed money to. Planting an irritated scowl on his face, he wrenched open the door. "What?" he demanded, in the name of Kami. "Miyuki?" The girl was frozen in the motion of knocking when he had opened the door, almost losing her balance due to the lack of resistance she had been expecting by the locked door, nearly stumbling into Naruto. "Senpai," she gasped, regaining her balance and avoiding a rather embarrassing situation. "Hey." "Miyuki," Naruto repeated, recovering from seeing his rather unexpected visitor. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you," she replied. "Is this a bad time?" Naruto wasn't sure how to answer that. The timing wasn't so much bad as it was unexpected. He hadn't even gotten to towel himself properly. His shirt clung to his wet back and his hair was dripping water on the floor. The girl stood patiently, if a little nervously, waiting for him to speak. "No, this isn't a bad time." Naruto moved away and opened the door wider to allow the girl in after running through a mental checklist to make sure his house was presentable enough to receive a guest. "Sorry about that." Thank goodness he had cleaned his apartment just a couple of days ago so that now it resembled a neglected storage room instead of the toxic dump site it used to barely a week ago. He directed her towards one of the only 2 chairs in his house while taking the couch. "So," he said once both of them were seated, "how did you know where I lived?" "Uruka-sensei told me," the girl explained, and Naruto swore inwardly. He had completely forgotten about the plans he'd made with the man. "I was hoping to run into you at the mission desk, but you weren't there, so I asked him where I could find you and he gave me your address." "Well," Naruto conceded as he got to his feet and went into his small kitchen to fetch some glasses, "you found me. Soda or juice?" "I'm afraid I'm out of tea." That was a lie. He never kept tea in his house, but she didn't need to know that. "I'll have the juice. Apple or orange?" "Orange, please." Naruto handed her a glass and poured some for himself, taking a generous sip, at least it hadn't gone bad yet, before sitting back again. "Where's your team?" he inquired. "Sensei gave us the weekend off after our last C rank." Miyuki replied, nestling the drink between her hands. Naruto raised an eyebrow trying to figure out why she was in his apartment, but couldn't bring himself to pose the question without sounding rude, so he just waited. The girl fidgeted uncomfortably under his gaze and gulped some juice as if trying to steel herself, which was when he realized how nervous the girl really was. "Would you want to train with me?" "What?" Miyuki's face reddened with embarrassment before she took a deep breath to calm herself. Naruto wasn't sure how much it helped, but her next words were coherent enough. "Would you want to train with me? Today?" he inquired. Miyuki nodded enthusiastically. He considered it. He really didn't have anything to do for the rest of the day, and it had been a long time since he had a training partner, and it wouldn't be a bad way to spend the day, to be honest. He couldn't say no to that expectant face, and he'd probably drive himself crazy trying to find something to do for the rest of the day anyway. At least this gave him something to do. Sure, why not? He decided, just let me go get change. He leaned casually against the tree, keeping a mental countdown in his head. 3, 2, 1. He ducked, and the place where his head had been a fraction of a second ago was peppered with kunai. Crouching low, he tracked the blur running among the tree. He followed suit, batting away a few kunai sent his way to arrest his movement by his retreating adversary with one of his own. She tried to retreat deeper into the forest, but he wasn't going to allow that and kept cutting her off. She soon realized that she didn't have a choice and now ran towards the open area of the ground, probably hoping that by getting there first she could gain some advantage. Just as he knew she would. He followed close on her heels, keeping her in sights this time. She had just entered the ground and then in a surprising maneuver turned around and let go several kunai. His eyes widened, they were coming at him a lot faster than he anticipated. His body was peppered with kunai, a lot of them, right before he turned into a log, indicating a successful substitution. She swore as she realized the trouble she was in and tried to move away, but it was too late. He didn't give her a chance to recover, and in a burst of speed he moved behind her. She still somehow managed to turn around to block his strike with her kunai. But the force behind the blow caught her off guard and she lost her balance. A leg sweep to drop her followed by a choke hold was all it took to incapacitate her completely. Her face turned an interesting shade of blue, but she managed to tap on his arm, conveying her surrender. He let her loose and she immediately collapsed on all fours, coughing and gasping. "That's it, take it easy," he instructed her, rubbing her back, slow and shallow breaths. Leaving her there to recover, Naruto walked to one of the training posts where he had left some of his gear. Fishing out a couple of water bottles, he tossed one of them to the still panting girl, who caught it effortlessly. "That was really good, you've gotten better," Naruto praised the girl between sips. "You nearly got me with your last trick." "Really?" Miyuki gasped, still recovering from her exertions as he uncapped her own bottle. "You think so?" Naruto had been impressed. She had managed to catch him off guard, with her last trick involving kunai and ninja wire. It was a simple enough trick. She had anticipated him following her and had managed to use the ninja wire between two training posts as a makeshift catapult. Only a quick substitution saved him from being shish kebabbed. Indeed, Naruto joined her on the ground next to her. "There's not much you did wrong there. You kept yourself hidden well, took your chances and tried to use the battlefield to your advantage. Hell, you might have won if your team had been with you." Miyuki blushed with pleasure and embarrassment at his praise and took another big gulp of water to have something to do. "How did you get this good?" she asked him. "Frankly speaking, I'm not sure if I'm quite as good as you think I am." Naruto laughed at the reverent tone in the girl's voice. "But I suppose it has something to do with surviving against foes much better than I was. I wouldn't recommend it though. Plain old hard work is a much safer way to build up competence." "Can we do this again?" she asked tentatively. "I mean, I learned a lot today." Naruto stayed silent for a while as he tried to process what he had just heard. This was certainly a first. Someone actually wanting his help because they thought he was better than them. "It's okay if you can't," she began, mistaking his silence for reluctance. No, it's not that," Naruto said hastily, trying to clear the confusion. "It's just that you caught me by surprise with that request." Again, he muttered the last word under his breath. "So?" Miyuki said, an expression of confusion mixed with hope on her face. "Can we?" "Yeah, sure, why not?" Naruto smiled at her and the girl's expression brightened. "So, how about Monday?" She spoke enthusiastically. "I'll be running D ranks with my team the whole day, but I'm quite sure I'll be free by evening." "I'm afraid I can't on Monday," Naruto said. I got assigned a team and we start on Monday. Oh. She sounded disappointed before brightening up again as her mind caught up to what he had just said. Oh, congratulations on that. Naruto laughed, patting her head, before getting up and dusting his pants. He considered something for a while. The day didn't have to end just because they were done training. Moreover, he hadn't even gotten the chance to celebrate his good fortune yet, and Miyuki was good if a little awkward company. Come on. He offered the still-seated girl his hand. Lunch is on me. The girl took the proffered hand gratefully and pulled herself to her feet. You're really good with those weapons, Naruto said as both of them walked out of the training ground. Thanks, the girl said proudly. I had the highest marks in the academy when it came to accuracy and ranged weapons. Naruto muttered thoughtfully, an idea planting itself in his head. You know, I just might know someone who can help you. Naruto made his way to the best weapon retailer in Konoha. He had just said his farewell to Miyuki and there was just one last thing he needed to do before he wrapped up his day. It was something he was planning on getting done tomorrow, but as he was out he thought it best to get it out of the way. It wasn't an old establishment by any means. Naruto still remembered the day it had opened 8 years ago. Back then it had been a little more than a shack. The first owner had been a civilian and understood little of the shinobi needs. Needless to say, it wasn't long before he went out of business, sold the place and migrated out of Konoha. For a few months the place had no takers. There was even talk of it being taken over by the establishment. But before any of that could happen, an ex-shinobi took it upon himself to overturn the fortunes of the place. The man had been forced to retire early due to a mission gone bad, which resulted in loss of 60% functionality in one of his legs. Thankfully he had his skills as a blacksmith to fall back on. So with his severance package he received along with a few loans, he bought the place and turned it into a weapons, smithy workshop. There were now 2 sections to the shop. The front section served as the shop, while the space at the back was where the smithy was. Even as he entered the shop he could hear the heaving of bellows and the sounds of metal striking metal. He was the only occupant of the shop at the moment, as even the usual person minding the shop was missing. He was sure that won't last though. The bell which announced his arrival as he opened the door would ensure that. He took the chance to browse through some of the wares. A particularly vicious-looking Chikuto caught his eye. It was a beautiful thing. A hand and a half in length, it looked delightfully deadly. He walked closer to examine it more closely and was about to remove it from its stand before a dry and condescending voice stopped him. You can't afford that, and how would you know? Because it costs more than the building your lousy apartment is in. Gee, way to be a buzzkill, Tenten. Naruto turned around to be greeted with the scowling face of a girl dressed in a black trousers and a shirt whose original color was now a mystery, her hair tied back by a yellow bandana. The scowl on her face was more a result of working in heat of the smithy rather than her displeasure at seeing him. Or at least he hoped so. Someone's got to keep your dreamy ass grounded before you break something that will force you into the streets, she said. If you break it, you bought it. If I do manage to break it, then it probably isn't worth buying now, is it? Naruto retorted. Tenten just shrugged. Tenten was someone Naruto had known almost as long as he could remember. She was a year older than him. Both of them were orphans who had been housed in the same orphanage. They had even struck up something of a friendship back in the day despite the matron's active attempts to dissuade her. But like most good things in his life, this didn't last either. Before long she was adopted and they lost contact. Naruto was heartbroken as he never even got to say goodbye to her. A few years later they did meet in the academy, but by then things had changed. She had her own friends and parents and couldn't obviously be bothered with a kid she had sort of known as an orphan, a relatively more tragic period in her life. He didn't blame her. So what can I do for you? Her voice turning professional now that the fun and games were done. Naruto emptied the bag he carried with him on the counter, creating a huge racket as damaged kunai and shuriken littered on it. Shuriken and kunai weren't exactly expensive, but it was always cheaper to get them repaired than to buy new ones. You'll get them by the day after tomorrow, Tenten said as she examined some of them. Can't you get them done sooner? Can't do. Tenten picked up a particularly damaged shuriken missing 2 of its teeth before tossing it into the recyclable waste dump without giving it a second look. Dad's busy with a commission and I got my own missions. Naruto sighed in disappointment. It looked like he'd have to buy the stuff this time around. So, should I get your usual order? Tenten inquired after going through his inventory. I wish, Naruto winced as he contemplated the dent this was going to make on his savings. Hopefully the improved pay would help things. I need thrice my usual order. Not planning on declaring war on Konoha, are you? She deadpanned. Haha. Naruto laughed dryly. You're funny, but no. I've been assigned a team and going to take our first mission on Monday. Tenten whistled appreciatively as she started on his order, piling on kunai and shuriken along with ninja wire and other knick-knacks. So that would be 3,253 ryo, she said, tallying up the cost. Come on, there has to be some sort of discount on bulk purchases. Naruto protested at the price. The price was perfectly reasonable, but it wouldn't be a sale if he didn't at least try to haggle. Tenten wasn't impressed. She was used to his antics by now, being one of their regular customers, and didn't even break her stride. I'll knock off the 3 ryo off the top to make it all even. She offered. How about that? Naruto grumbled theatrically as he counted the money and handed it to the girl, who didn't even bother counting it before throwing it inside the cash register. Anything else? She said, a little puzzled when Naruto still hadn't moved out of the shop. There is actually. Naruto shuffled on his feet uncomfortably, knowing what he was about to ask next might not exactly be to the girl's taste. Remember the favor you said you owed me? Yeah? Tenten said, just the tiniest hint of dread entering her voice. Well, I want to cash it in. Tenten folded her arms expectantly as Naruto struggled with the words to best put forward his request. There is this genin, Miyuki, he said. She is something of a long-range specialist, kinda like you. No, Tenten said flatly. No? Naruto was nonplussed. You didn't even listen to what I have to say. You want to impress a girl, you're on your own, Buster, she said. No way in hell am I getting involved in this. First of all, she is just 12, so you. Naruto deadpanned. Secondly, how the hell did you even make that leap? You know what, don't answer that. I'm not trying to date her, I was just hoping you could give her some pointers. Naruto made sure she couldn't interrupt her again as he laid down the entire thing in front of her. You want me to help a rookie? That's almost worse. Tenten turned around looking ready to escort him out of the shop, physically if she had to. Yeah, sorry, but I don't have the time to babysit. I did enough of that when I was a genin, thank you. You owe me, Naruto said, pre-empting her and putting some distance between them before she could reach him. Naruto? She gave an exasperated sigh. Come on, I'm sure we can work something else out. And what's in it for you anyway? Are you going to do it or not? Naruto stared down the girl, not budging. The two teens glaring at each other, neither willing to back down. Fine, she finally conceded, I'll do it. But we are even after this. Who's her Junin-sensei? 5 minutes later, Naruto was walking out of the shop, content with how his day had gone. She better be worth it, Uzumaki. Tenten got a pot shot at him before he walked out of hearing range. Naruto merely chuckled as he made his way home. Shikamaru knocked 3 times on the door of the apartment and waited for the occupant to open it. It was a nice neighborhood. Not too affluent but not poor either, if a little congested. He hadn't been here in 3 weeks and probably wouldn't have come today either, but recent events sort of demanded it. He felt a little bad about that. Just another person in his life he felt he was failing. Nothing new in that, but that was the problem with having set low standards for yourself. You tend to disappoint people who keep expecting better from you. For a long time he had been okay with that too. He didn't get a chance to immerse himself too deeply in his misery as the door opened to reveal a pretty if tired-looking woman, dark-haired, crimson-eyed woman, dressed in a red apron. Shikamaru, a smile broke on her face at seeing her visitor. I was sure you'd forgotten the way to my home. Kurenai-sensei, he greeted the woman as she allowed him to walk in. The house was in a state of ordered chaos, a sign of what the day promised to be. A cry of recognition dragged his attention to a toddler on the floor accompanied by a myriad of stuffed toys. The baby gave him a toothy grin and waved her arms to get his attention, and Shikamaru couldn't help returning her smile with one of his own, before crouching down and picking her up. The baby squealed with joy as he cajoled her and made those baby noises adults did when confronted with a cute baby. You should come by more often, you know. Kurenai smirked at the camaraderie her daughter shared with the boy. She misses you. I'll try, Shikamaru said non-committally. Kurenai didn't call him out on it. One of the reasons he found her company a lot more bearable than almost anyone else. She simply watched contentedly as Shikamaru bounced her baby on his lap. Would you like some tea? Kurenai moved to the kitchen and set to work. Sure, Shikamaru managed, as he kept the toddler entertained who was now pulling at his cheeks with surprising strength. Kurenai Yuihi had been in a relationship with his late sensei. Not someone he had known personally and not how he had known her. At least not at the beginning anyway. To him she had been the lady who had been assigned a team consisting of people from his batch. Obviously competent to have reached the rank of Junin. It was Ino who had clued him onto that little fact about her being Asuma's lover. She never missed an opportunity to tease Asuma about it whenever she got the chance. He never cared much, so Asuma had a girlfriend. Big deal. He was an adult, and if he thought he could pursue a successful semi-secretive relationship with a coworker, well, more power to him. To him the situation was more troublesome than it was worth, but hey, it wasn't his problem. His first personal interaction with her had been immediately after he had been discharged. She had tracked him down to his cloud-watching site. He had braced himself to receive an ass-chewing. To his great surprise, she just told him that it wasn't his fault and she didn't blame him. Till that moment he hadn't even realized how badly he needed to hear those words, how badly he needed absolution from someone, from anyone. To his shame he had broken down in tears and she held him as he wept on her shoulder. But even after that moment of bonding, what they had could barely be called a casual acquaintance. Part of the reason had been his own decision to break off ties from his old life, the other had been her own job and responsibilities as a shinobi serving Konoha. No, that needed the fuel of another tragedy. He remembered that day like it was yesterday, even though it had been almost a year since. He was in his regular hangout spot at the park, hustling people at shogi, when a chunin beckoned him. He had tried to explain that what he was doing wasn't illegal, but the man had brushed aside his explanations and gave him the dreaded news. Sarutobi Asuma had been killed in action. He felt as if someone had pulled the very ground from his feet. He barely paid attention to the rest of the details. How the team he had been leading was ambushed and how he sacrificed his life to make sure the rest of his team got away. Despite his shock, he managed to keep his wits about himself to pose a rather pertinent question. Why was he being told this? He wasn't family and he was no longer Asuma's subordinate. The man had explained that Asuma's final request was for him to break the news to Kurenai. He had honored his sensei's last wish. This time it was his turn to hold the woman as she cried on his shoulder. His last few meetings with Asuma made sense. Kurenai had been pregnant with Asuma's child. In his own way during their shogi games, Asuma had asked him to take care of his heir, his legacy. Back then he had blown away his sensei's concerns. Had Asuma foreseen his own death? It wasn't unusual for shinobi to be pragmatic about their survival. Still, Shikamaru had never believed Asuma could perish. He had always seemed so invincible. The man had survived a war and a violent and turbulent tenure as a ninja guardsman to the daimyo, only to be martyred at a lousy B-ranked. He hated irony. So, how are things? She handed the aromatic beverage as he maneuvered the baby to his non-dominant side to hold the offered cup. I've some news, Shikamaru said. I was offered reinstatement. Kurenai froze mid-sip, before putting the cup back on the table. Way to soften me up, kid. The sarcasm of the words was ruined by the barely concealed excitement in her voice. I don't know how a preamble could have helped, Shikamaru shrugged. Wow, she muttered, I guess congratulations are in order. She smiled at him. I knew they would one day realize how much they needed you, but I guess you're feeling pretty conflicted about this. Was I that obvious? He asked. Kurenai had a way of cutting through the bullshit without being blunt. It was an impressive skill. You weren't, she assured him, but I've still retained my skills, kiddo, rusty though they might be. I don't know what to do. She leaned forward to place a hand on his knee. Despite being uncomfortable at the touch of the beautiful woman, he held his composure. If this isn't what you want, then don't do it, she said, forcing him to look her in the eyes, but don't let your misplaced guilt hold you back. Shikamaru broke away from her gaze. They had been over it way too many times before and he didn't want to repeat it. Have you thought about reinstatement? He asked her, trying to change the subject. I may have to. Kurenai tickled her daughter under the chin, getting a delighted squeal from her, but Kaya-chan is still so young. Maybe in another year when she is old enough. Asuma's and my savings are holding us up for now. Shikamaru nodded. He had offered her financial help when she had taken her maternity leave, but she had flatly refused. He didn't bother trying to convince her. It would have been too troublesome. So he found alternative ways to help her. What she believed was Asuma's trust fund was actually an account set up by Shikamaru with the help of a few well-wishers, where he made regular deposits of his winnings. The baby's cries broke him out of his thoughts. She must be hungry. She took the baby from Shikamaru's arms. She's always hungry. I guess that's my cue to leave, he said, getting to his feet. But you just got here. Kurenai protested over her daughter's wails. If you wait just a bit longer you might even meet Ino-chan. I've got somewhere to be, he said, his inclination to get out of the apartment greater than before now that he knew his ex-teammate was going to be there soon. Thanks for the tea, and the talk. Shikamaru, wait. She called out to him and he stopped at the threshold of her apartment. Asuma would be proud of you no matter what you decide to do. I hope you know that. Giving her one last nod of acknowledgement, Shikamaru walked away from the woman who was his only link to his sensei and her crying baby. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining brightly, the birds were chirping, the meadow was lush, green and soft beneath him. Somewhere in the distance he could hear the kids playing, their screams of joy and laughter carrying through to him. Despite all that, not a single speck of cloud in the entire sky. You know I have no idea what you see in this, came the dry voice of his only companion. No, one told you to stick around, Shikamaru retorted. I certainly haven't tied you here, have I? The man remained silent, and the words that went unsaid couldn't have been louder if they had been screamed through a loudspeaker. Yes, he was what kept him tied there. Don't you have a job or something? He said, trying to cover up his slip. I've taken the day off, came the reply. They can survive one day without me. I'm surprised the Hokage allowed you a leave, Shikamaru remarked. From what I've heard she is a slave driver. Is that why you haven't filed your papers yet? Shikamaru cursed himself inwardly. Despite the joking tone, the question in those words were barely hidden. He had walked straight into that one. He had known this would come up. The man was rather highly placed in the bureaucratic setup of Konoha. There really wasn't much that was kept from him. For all his intellect and foresight, he still managed to get himself maneuvered into the pit he had avoided for the better part of 45 minutes. He could choose to be passive-aggressive about it, but that really wasn't his style. Maybe I don't want to file my papers, he said. Maybe I'm done with this life. Ever considered that? Maybe, the man sighed. That's a dangerous word, kiddo. It's neither here nor there. So, what would you have me do? He said mockingly. I should just walk in, like nothing happened, get a new start. Is that what I should do? Shikamaru had never been so frustrated in his life. He was sure he was done being a shinobi, done with his old life, old friends, everything which defined him before that fateful day. Now he was told he could start again, right where he left off. He wasn't sure how he felt about that, and to make matters worse there wasn't even the calming influence of clouds to see him through. Hell if I know, I'm not telling you to do anything, the man replied in answer to his query. All I know is that you might regret going back and you might regret not going back. So? He prodded. I guess it all comes down to which regret you would rather live with, kid, came the answer. That's all I got for you. That's depressing. It is what it is. Shikamaru contemplated those words. Those words could hardly be called his guide to path-breaking revelations. He hadn't suddenly turned into a new man, or the proverbial butterfly spreading its wings for the first time after having spent its life as an ugly larva. He still had his doubts. He would always have them. To his surprise, however, he realized that he was okay with that, for now anyway. He got to his feet, dusting his trousers. Leaving already? The man exclaimed, a little surprised by his abrupt actions. Yeah, he said, it's a lousy day for cloud watching. That it is, his companion agreed, getting to his feet himself. So, what are you going to do now? What do you think, old man? He said, feeling a little more resolute than he did a few minutes ago. I'm gonna go and choose the regrets I will have to live with. Their eyes met and a sort of understanding passed between them, and he clapped him once on the shoulder with paternal pride. Shikamaru rolled his eyes at the gesture, but allowed it. And come see your mother, will you? He told him, she misses you. You're just saying that because right now you're the only recipient of her nagging, aren't you? Troublesome brat. The next day, the people in and around the Hokage Tower were greeted by the sight of Nara Shikamaru dressed in his Konoha fatigues under his Chunin vest, making his way to the mission desk. He paused before crossing the threshold of the entrance, and gave one last look to the cloud-riddled sky before walking in. Chunin Nara Shikamaru, reporting for duty. He stated to the official at the desk, submitting his papers. 5 minutes later he was led to the workstation Kakashi had led him to barely 36 hours ago along with stacks of mission files. That's all? He asked the Chunin who helped him carry the boxes to his table. Yeah, the man said, that's it. You're gonna need a lot of coffee if you hope to get through all those in one day. Thanks for the tip, he muttered under his breath as he ripped open the first box. He would have to work fast. He only had 24 hours to pick a mission for Team 7 after all. That's all for now. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments.